your department for what they're doing during this especially vulnerable time for the homeland. I know it's probably not comfortable for you, to have any of us reference the impeachment that Speaker Johnson brought to the floor, but I just want to get some dates right. Was it February 13 when Speaker Johnson was finally able to get the votes to impeach you? Was that the date?
I don't recall.
I think it was February 13. And by the way, it was kind of a second serve impeachment, if we're using like a tennis analogy. The first one was a fault. They couldn't get the votes. In pickleball, you would have only gotten one serve, and that would have been it. But if it was tennis, they got a second serve and barely were able to do it. Today, it's April 16, so I'm not great at math, but I think that's 2 months. Have the impeachment articles, as we sit here today, been sent over to the Senate for a trial? Are you aware?
I don't know whether something has occurred while I have been testifying before this committee, Congressman.
I only bring that up because, again, like we were told, there's this urgency, there's this crisis at the border. We got to do this now. We got to, bring one of our, colleagues who's suffering and going through cancer treatments that we're all rooting for. We got to bring him out of those treatments so he can come and be the pivotal vote so that we can get you impeached and sent over to the Senate. It's been 2 months, and it's still not over at the Senate. So I don't think it's the urgency that we were told. It seems like it was more the former president wanted us to do this, and so Speaker Johnson did it, and we seem to go wherever the former president wants us to go, if that's on border policy, if that's on funding Ukraine. It's not really an America first agenda. It's me first when it comes to the former president, and then these guys get kind of dragged along, and that's why the articles, as we sit here today, have still not been sent over. But I want to talk a little bit about disinformation. Does Russia or China or Iran or Venezuela have a right to free speech in our elections, as you see it?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but...
Well, Americans have a right on social media platforms to speak freely about our elections, but do you see our adversaries as having a right to pollute our public forum when it comes to speech?
Congressman, one of the threat streams attacking the integrity of our elections is disinformation from adverse nation states. That includes the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
And I also find it interesting, my colleagues, some of them don't like that you're going after disinformation, but one of our very able staffers just provided me with a July 11, 2018 transcript in this room when the former president, Donald Trump, was president, and you have a number of Republican members who are arguing that it's actually disinformation that's the problem. You have multiple Republican members saying that disinformation is our foreign adversary's tool of choice, as Mr. Rogers on this committee at the time said. Mr. Perry, we know Mr. Perry from January 6th. He also goes into identifying foreign disinformation as being the problem. So, again, what we want the department to do is not to choose sides politically, because we know that our adversaries, first and foremost, they just want chaos so that they can go to their authoritarian states and say, this is why democracy doesn't work, look what's going on in America, and they're undermining it. But would you say that when you look at disinformation and when you see disinformation, that it doesn't have a straight line as far as benefiting one party or the other, that our adversaries really, more than anything, just want chaos in America?
Adverse nation states seek to attack our nation, our democracy, this country, and we battle their efforts every single day.
Yeah. Well, again, Mr. Secretary, thank you for what you do. We're grateful that you're in the chair that you're in. It's not an easy place to sit, and I'm confident that there will be a swift acquittal if it ever gets sent over to the Senate, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman.
And your fidelity to our nation, it is inspiring. Notwithstanding all of the challenges that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle present to you, at the end of the day, you have kept the homeland safe during your tenure, and we're grateful for that. I want to respond to a false allegation raised by some of my Republican colleagues about non-citizens voting in federal elections. First of all, federal law already prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections, and there is absolutely zero evidence that there are significant violations of that law. Republicans' efforts to make it harder to vote will disenfranchise low-income and minority voters and will do nothing to make our elections more secure. Instead, we should focus on the real threats to our election security, which include foreign interference efforts, which I know Secretary Mayorkas is committed to addressing. And additionally, I'm deeply disturbed by Congresswoman Green's attacks on HIAS, originally known as the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, an organization that has been supporting refugees for over 140 years. Baseless conspiracy theories about HIAS fueled the anti-Semitic murder of 11 individuals at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And it's disgraceful to see the same kind of misinformation repeated in this committee. So I wanted that on the record. Mr. Secretary, last month CISA issued the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for Mandatory Cyber Incident Reporting, and I congratulate the department on this important milestone. Now that the NPRM is out, DHS must redouble its efforts to harmonize incident report rules across government. The Department's Cyber Incident Reporting Council, CIRC, will play a critical role in that process. Secretary Mayorkas, CIRC issued a report containing recommendations regarding the harmonization cyber incident reporting rules last September. What actions has the CIRC taken since the report was released to promote harmonization, and what more can the CIRC be doing to promote harmonization?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for your question. We are working with federal departments and agencies across the administration to execute on the imperative of harmonizing our reporting rules. Not only that, Congresswoman, we are working with our international partners so that harmonization would not be restricted to the domestic environment, but the international arena as well.
That's good news. As part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Congress provided $1 billion in grants to state, local, and tribal and territorial governments to strengthen their cyber defenses. This program is based on bipartisan legislation I authored with my colleagues on this committee. Unfortunately, this funding expires in FY 2025, which could mean state and local governments cut their cybersecurity spending, even as they continue to face serious cybersecurity threats, including from foreign adversaries like China and Russia. It is my hope that this committee will work together to extend the vital program so we can build our initial investment. Secretary Mayorkas, do you agree with me that state and local governments will continue to need federal support as they defend their cyber intrusions? And will you commit to working with me and this committee to reauthorize the state and local cybersecurity grant program?
I do, and I will, Congresswoman.
Wonderful. And Mr. Secretary, just one other note of concern, and that's with the nation of Haiti. You should have received a letter or been CC'd on a letter regarding the concern about individuals being returned at this stage who could be sent into harm's way, into famine, into the myriad of challenges that that nation continues to face in this moment. I look forward to speaking with you further about this. It's a major concern for many constituencies, many families across this nation of Haitian descent.
The gentlelady yield. You have a second?
Sure. Yes, I will yield.
Thank you so very much. I wanted to follow your line of questioning very quickly, which is a very important line of questioning, and that is to ensure that we get fixed, Mr. Secretary, what is broken. Sometimes we have equipment, technology that is not working correctly. I'd like to submit into the record, as unanimous consent, healthcare.gov, ineffective planning and oversight practices underscore the need for improved contract management. Will you continue to access getting our equipment refunded or improved so that we can work with equipment that will help you do the job?
Yes, Congressman.
So ordered, and it's entered into the record, and the gentlelady's time has expired.
I thank you for yielding.
Absolutely. I now recognize the gentlelady, Ms. Lee from Florida, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Secretary Mayorkas, I'd like to continue the discussion about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and specifically the Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards Program that is overseen by CISA. The CFATS program, would you please describe for us how your budget provides continued support for the CFATS program?
Congresswoman, I'll have to remind myself of the specific funding for that program. That funding is very important, and of course it has been in tremendous peril recently. We strongly support the continuation of the CFATS program. It enables us to ensure that high-risk chemical facilities are as secure as they need to be.
And would you agree that a continuation of that program is an important part of the mission to protect critical infrastructure?
I would, Congresswoman.
And would you also encourage our friends and partners over in the Senate to take up the bill that was passed by the House and is currently there awaiting their consideration and action?
Congresswoman, I'll look forward to reviewing that bill again, but we do indeed consider the CFATS program to be very important.
And I'd like to then return to the subject of CISA and its role in elections infrastructure and its efforts to help state and local election officials protect elections infrastructure. Specifically there, could you describe what CISA does to help state and local elections officials defend against threats from foreign adversaries and domestic adversaries to that infrastructure?
Congresswoman, one of the things we do is provide training with respect to the threat, to be able to identify the threat. We share best practices. We have marked election security as one of the 6 priority areas in some of our Homeland Security grant programs to ensure that state and local jurisdictions devote needed resources to a fundamental need of our country, and that is to safeguard the integrity of our election processes.
And moving to the question of breaches and cyber attacks, what efforts is CISA making to bolster its own internal cybersecurity? I know they were victim to a recent cyber attack. Can you describe for us the efforts internal to CISA on cybersecurity?
Congresswoman, so that is a priority for the department as a whole. Our Chief Information Officer and that team is consistently working day in and day out to enhance our security. In addition, CISA works to enhance the cybersecurity of the federal civilian domain. It issues binding operational directives based on what it learns from particular incidents to ensure that agencies and departments are patching or protecting themselves against detected vulnerabilities. This is a very significant mission area of ours. The cybersecurity threat vector is not, unfortunately, diminishing.
Related to HSI, I'd like to go back to that subject, which you addressed earlier as it related to some transnational gang activities. But specifically within your budget, I'd like to discuss HSI and its operations related to child exploitation and human trafficking. Your budget calls for additional funding there to help HSI investigators combat human trafficking, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And would you explain for us the types of activities and role that HSI takes specifically as it relates to the exploitation and trafficking of children?
Congresswoman, I named crimes of exploitation one of our 6 mission priorities for the first time in the department's history. Tomorrow I will be with HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, in New York City, launching a new campaign against online child sexual exploitation and abuse. This is a scourge that is not only nationwide, but is global in nature. More than 36 million tips were presented to enforcement authorities across the world. Domestically, more than 63,000 of them reflected an imminent or grave threat. The extent of this crime cannot be overstated. The work of HSI in combating it is heroic, both in disseminating education and awareness, in investigating the crimes, in rescuing victims, and holding perpetrators accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. My colleague has actually just kind of initiated the conversation that I wanted to have with you as well. You're having discussions with HSI, HIDA, DPS out of the state of Texas. One of the biggest issues that they are confronted with is their ability to navigate aggregated data on the criminals that are moving the individuals into sex trafficking space. Are you comfortable with the amount of money that you're asking for in the cyber risk, cyber threat domain, and the artificial intelligence and machine learning space? Because they're two different entities that need to work very well together. And my concern is that the right hand's not talking to the left. We need to expand the ability for our agents to process the data. And in the budget proposal, there's only $5 million for the new AI office. Are you happy with that number?
Congressman, we are pleased with receiving additional funding. When it comes to crimes of exploitation, I must tell you that if I had a wish list, the amount of money would be greater. The amount of personnel that we could dedicate to this would be greater. This scourge, this heinous crime, is of extraordinary breadth and depth of depravity, and we work every day. It is remarkable what our personnel do to combat this with our state and local partners, as well as our international partners. This is one of the top issues that is raised when I am engaging in the international arena with our Five Eyes partners, as well as our European Union colleagues.
I hate to speak for the body itself, but I think we're really hungry and have a good appetite for the expansiveness of AI in this space. This is where I'm going to tell you to be hyper aggressive in order to save these women and children that are in this problem set.
Congressman.
Damn, that's the third time you've done that to me. I tell you, I don't even know where to go with that. I was hoping you weren't going to do that.
Congressman.
I mean, we go into the pronouns and all that stuff. Just
Congressman, 3 strikes and I'm out. I understand that. Let me share with you that we are indeed harnessing AI to advance the mission in the fight against online child sexual exploitation. At the same time, AI presents a risk because the perpetrators use it to advance their depraved criminality. And so, Congressman, this is something that we are harnessing for good and fighting against bad.
that's where I was going earlier. Do we have the ability to touch the individuals that are being touched by the bad actors? I'm hoping we do, and I know that's a very aggressive problem set. I'm going to roll right on you to immigration. And the Senate bill, I never even saw it, so just give me a little latitude on this one. I think you're the 14th Homeland Secretary, if I count. Is that correct? You're number 14?
I am the 7th confirmed.
7th confirmed? Okay. I don't know where I got 14. I thought it was on Wikipedia. Whatever. Okay. Mr. Hunter, this Deputy Secretary Hunter was in front of the Border Security Subcommittee a few weeks ago, and we were talking immigration issues, immigration policy. And I had asked, tasked, requested, because in your opening statement, you said Congress has not reformed immigration since the 90s. Well, it is our job to pass legislation, but the subject matter experts in immigration live underneath your umbrella. I consider you, are you a subject matter expert in immigration, sir?
I certainly am admiring of those who know much more than I.
My ask was, and I was, Mr. Suozzi and Ms. Ramirez were in agreement with this, it seems that the frontline operators are the best to address the immigration issue and where the blockade is, where the choke point is. Has a policy ever been written from the department and sent up to Congress? Because I've never seen one. So I'm asking you, have you done that in your tenure as secretary?
Have I myself submitted policy recommendations?
No, rewritten the policy that Mr. Garcia holds up frequently in our hearings that you can't even read. It is the absolute problem. Has the Homeland Security Department itself said, you know what, here's the problem set. Congress can't get anything done for the last 20-something years. We're going to write it for you, submit it. This is the best course of action. Has Homeland Security done that?
There are two powerful examples. Number one, on his first day in office, President Biden presented legislation to Congress. Secondly, I had the privilege and the honor of sitting beside the bipartisan group of senators who worked out a compromise that I urge Congress to pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, for 5 minutes of testimony, or questioning.
Thank you. Secretary Mayorkas, thank you for being here to speak on the FY25 presidential budget request. The president's budget request reflects the administration's priorities, correct?
It does, Congressman.
I'd like to talk about the threats to Homeland and DHS that we see according to your budget request. I was pleased last year that you acknowledged the threat that unmanned aircraft systems pose at our southern border, saying in part that, I quote, drones are being used in a myriad of ways, a number of different ways to create a public safety risk, close quotes. You and I agree on this point. The cartels use the drones at the border and is alarming, from using them to track the movement of Border Patrol agents to providing overwatch for human smuggling to transporting narcotics and even outfitting them with explosive payloads. While for each drone that the CBP flies, the Mexican cartel flies 17, based on the last information I got. This issue hasn't improved since last year. In fact, last month in a Senate hearing, NORAD Commander General Gio testified that the number of drone incursions alarmed him, saying that he has, quote, talked to CBP, who are responsible for UAS incursions at the border, and they put the number of incursions at thousands. He went on to say that he sees the potential of a threat posed by drones to the national defense as only growing. Secretary, is counting the illicit use of drones at the border a priority for DHS and CBP?
Congressman, it certainly is.
It's very concerning and very confusing to me. This is your budget request for CBP's counter-UAS program. You see it right behind me. Zero. Not one penny. Not one penny, and the threat is unbelievable. As the use of drones by bad actors at our border evolves and continues to bring a threat to our homeland, it is unconscionable that you wouldn't request a single penny for CBP to carry out its counter-UAS mission. You requested zero. Thousands of UAV flights into U.S. airspace by Mexican cartel have the ability, we've got the ability to block, drop, or intercept these drones. Moving on, I want to revisit the ICE detention bed issue that my colleagues have mentioned today. As illegal aliens continue to pour across the southern border, your FY25 budget requests funding for just 34,000 ICE beds, barely half of the 60,000 beds requested by the Trump administration in FY21. In May of 2021, you testified in a House subcommittee hearing that you are, quote, concerned about the overuse of detention, close quote. Is it safe to presume that this is why you want to cut bed space and release illegal aliens on the streets of America?
Congressman, it is not my desire to cut detention beds, and I should say returning the counter-UAS authorities. We are seeking to harness artificial intelligence to amplify the strength of our counter-UAS capabilities.
Well, I'll tell you this right here on the UAS. We have the technology. Matter of fact, in my community where I live in Huntsville, Alabama, where we could block them, drop them, or intercept them. It's being used in Ukraine. It's being used in Israel. The only thing is that capability, you've got to request it to make sure that it happens. So I'll promise you, I hope that we can come to a reason, because when those UAVs are coming into America, setting down, dropping fentanyl, being stuffed full of cash, and flying back to the Mexican cartel, it's totally unacceptable, and I take you for your word that you're going to do something about it. If Congress is willing to fund even more ICE bed space or near Trump-era levels, would this be a solution to detaining more illegal aliens?
Congressman, the greater the detention capacity, the greater our ability to detain more people. The bipartisan Senate legislation funded 50,000 detention beds, and that's a powerful example.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, at the beginning of 2022, you testified to Congress that you had operational control of the border. Then the following hearings, you backtracked to alter the definition of operational control. Now in 2024, in a hearing last week, you testified that we have a crisis at the southern border. Are you finally admitting to what the American people have known to be true, that your border policies don't work? Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Burkeen, for 5 minutes of question.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Secretary, I'm really concerned about Real ID compliance. I want to shift a narrative to discuss that, which would be a part of budget implementation. Real ID, under your administration, says by 2025 there will be compliance. It was designed, supposed to build confidence in the identity of travelers post 9/11 to protect our U.S. citizenry. That's how it was sold when it was passed years ago. Under your leadership, the department is going to start implementing this. This Transportation Security Administration, TSA, will be prohibited from accepting driver's license and identification cards that don't meet certain standards, federal standards. You've said that you're continuing to work closely with U.S. states to meet the Real ID requirements. So here's where I'm going to take this. I've heard from 2 Illinois state lawmakers that illegals in their states, they've got verification, are now able to obtain Real ID compliant driver's license. I want to reiterate that. In Illinois, illegal aliens now can get Real ID compliant driver's license by checking the box on, quote, employment authorization document, which is one of the subsets on the state website that is required by the state of Illinois as an option. It can be obtained by this illegal, but it comes under the parole, which has been something that's been implemented by you in this administration. And so with that parole, this employment authorization document box can be checked. And this, in my opinion, and I think that most Americans would say this totally undermines Real ID compliance given the lack of background checks that goes into knowing who these people are. There's a real lack of information. Yes, you can do some Interpol. Yes, you can do some background checks, but you have, in terms of the United States' ability to understand who these people really are, we don't. Is Real ID compromised? I believe it is. And I think this is a glaring fault in the system. And so I'm going to go to a quick question to you, yes or no. Should illegal aliens get Real ID driver's license?
Congressman, I look forward to following up with you on the integrity of the Real ID program as it is envisioned and we are phasing in. That has been a program.
Because I've got limited time, Mr. Secretary. Yes or no? Should illegal aliens have the option, in your opinion, to get Real ID compliant driver's licenses? Yes or no?
Congressman, I look forward to following up with you.
Okay, I wish you had a no on that. Next question. Should illegal aliens vote? As Illinois and New York, we know that they're voting. Should illegal aliens be allowed to vote in this country, yes or no?
It is my understanding that illegal aliens cannot vote in federal elections.
Are they allowed to vote? The answer is yes. In New York and in Illinois, they are allowed to vote. And so whether it's federal elections or others, my question to you all ago, I'd love your answer. Should they be allowed to vote?
Congressman, that policy issue is outside the remit of the Department of Homeland Security. It is our obligation.
I need to move on for time, I'm sorry. Mr. Secretary, you have contended that the entire, quote, the entire hemisphere is gripped with a level of migration that is unprecedented in recent history, end of quote. You said that more or less today in your opening statement. I think that this avoids accountability for the invasion of our southern border. I think it shifts the blame on random events. But if that narrative is to be understood or followed, what are those events? I mean, I look around the world and I go, in South America, was there some tsunami? Was there a hurricane that I was not aware of? But the answer is no. It ultimately for those who have the context of the Wizard of Oz, it's like the wizard standing at the microphone saying, disregard the man as the curtain's being pulled back by the little dog, Toto, disregard the man standing behind the curtain pulling levers and spinning wheels. I mean, I think the American people have this figured out. The migration is because it's been an advertisement under this administration, come into this country. I come from the Sooner State in Oklahoma, Sooner State. History designates legal land run occurred in the 1880s. This was not for illegals. This was for legal citizens. History will remember this time, I believe, in the past 3 years as Biden's land run for illegals, paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Taxpayers are being asked to give their treasure and their children's treasure of the future for this. FAIR organization says it cost us $4,000 for every illegal immigrant. A gold rush to transport illegals to the city of their choice, free emergency health care, and then once these people have a child, there's cash payments in the form of earned income tax credits, thousands of dollars, food stamps once they have a child, food stamps once they have a child, or once they have a child again, Medicaid on top of the food stamps. So here's where I'm going with this. Does your budget proposed, which I will contend it does, especially the one that we're deeming as the slush fund, allow for dollars to go into countries as far south as Panama for NGOs, non-government organizations, to promote people coming to our country, in effect telling military-age men, go north, young men, go north.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Mr. Crane from Arizona for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting because I hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle consistently talk about how we can't agree on anything over here on the Republican side of the aisle. And there's some truth to that. There has been, definitely some debates, some arguments within our own party. But one thing that we can agree upon is that you're doing a horrible job, sir, and that you needed to be impeached. That's pretty wild, seeing as how we've been able to agree upon very few things and with the margin that we have. But we could all come together, look at the data, hear the stories back in the district, listen to the family members that have been destroyed because of your complete dereliction of duty, and we all agree that you needed to be impeached. Secretary Mayorkas, did you swear an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States?
Yes, I did, Congressman.
Yeah? How many times have you done that?
I certainly can identify 5 when I
Okay, thank
sworn
you.
in.
Are you aware of Article 4, Section 4? Do you know what that article is?
There may be more than 5 instances. I just want to be
Okay.
clear to the
Yeah,
best.
okay, great. Article 4, Section 4, are you familiar with that article?
When I was sworn in as an assistant.
Okay, since you're not going to answer, it's called the Invasion Clause. Do you know what the Invasion Clause says, sir?
The second time was.
The federal government will protect and defend each state from invasion, okay? Since you don't seem to be getting it, I had our staff here bring up this graph here. This is you. This is the last administration. Again, you, last administration. That looks like an invasion on a graph. We've heard from the people that have sat here and testified in these chambers about their family members being raped and murdered by people that weren't supposed to be here, that your administration allowed to be here and then didn't keep track of, didn't deport, didn't detain. Tell me, sir, how you haven't allowed an invasion into this country.
Congressman, I am incredibly proud to support the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security who enforce the laws of the United States every single day, many of whom risk their lives to secure our borders.
Yeah, despite your horrific leadership, yes, they do. And I'm proud to know many of them as well. They are great people. But we all know what the morale is like in the Border Patrol right now, and it's horrible. I hear it from Border Patrol agents every day. Again, sir, my question is, how have you not violated your oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, specifically Article 4, Section 4, which says that you, as Homeland Security, will protect each state from invasion? Again, you, last administration. How can you make that argument?
I work every day, quite proudly, to advance the security of the border and support the men and women of the Department of Homeland
You may be
Security.
working every day, but it seems as if you're working for the other side of the aisle. It seems as if you're working for our enemies. And that's exactly what the American people see. That's exactly why they supported us impeaching you. And that's exactly why you had so many members of this conference that is often divided come together to impeach you, sir. Let me ask you this question, Secretary Mayorkas. Do you think our enemies are stupid?
Congressman, you could launch whatever false and deplorable
Do you
accusations.
think our adversaries are stupid, sir?
Congressman, our adversaries vary in capability, and we address the defense of the United States and the interests of the United States accordingly.
No, you're not. Okay, you are not doing that. As a matter of fact, do you think it's possible that maybe some of our adversaries, the most dangerous ones like the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Russians, etc., might employ unconventional warfare and send their soldiers, because our border is wide open, through the southern border without a uniform, without firearms, with instructions to wreak havoc in this country once they're here, once you've allowed them to be here? Do you think that's possible, Secretary Mayorkas?
Congressman, over the last 11 months, we have removed or returned 630,000 people, more than any fiscal year since 2013. And
well, you're bragging about how much you've returned, but you don't want to brag about how many you've let in, do you?
Congressman, individuals who arrive and claim asylum are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings. If they do not qualify for relief under our laws, we seek to remove them in enforcing our laws.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for you, Mr. Mayorkas, or Mr. Secretary, and we would ask that you'd respond to those in writing. And I think there were several during that the time kind of fell, and I'll let those members send those to you for you to follow up on. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. And I think the ranking member has a unanimous consent request and also a closing statement. So I'll just let you do those together, Mr. Ranking Member.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that portions of the July 18th, 2018 hearing transcript referred by Mr. SWAWELL be inserted in the record.
So ordered. And your record recognized for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Secretary Mayorkas for agreeing to testify before this committee today, despite ongoing baseless partisan attacks against him. Mr. Secretary, you have done what I consider a good job at defending this administration, given the constraints that you have to operate from in terms of resources. The Secretary's willingness to appear in support of the department's needs demonstrate his character as a truly dedicated public servant. I'm not sure I can say the same for colleagues on the other side of the aisle who prefer ranting while steadfastly refusing to provide the authority and resources the department needs. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't look the brave DHS employees in the face and claim you support them when you refuse to put your vote where your mouth is. Yet, this is exactly what my Republican colleagues have done this entire Congress. It's appalling. DHS only received funding for fiscal year 2024 due to overwhelming Democratic support, just like in 2023. Yet Republicans try to claim that it is you, Secretary Mayorkas, that is undermining border security. This hypocrisy is astounding. The hearing, which was supposed to be about the DHS budget, has become yet another mega border hearing. I did not hear one Republican colleague raise concerns about whether FEMA will have the funding needed to respond to an increasing number of deadly national disasters, nor did they engage with DHS's work to defend against legitimate threats to our 2024 election. Instead, choosing to waste time drumming up anti-immigrant sentiment with unfounded allegations. Nor did they want to discuss how the department is responding to domestic terrorist attacks that have left American communities scared and outraged. DHS is tasked with handling all of these issues and more. Yet my Republican colleagues seem more interested in pretending to be outraged than doing the hard work of government. This is simply not the way to get things done. It takes complete and utter compromise, like we saw in the Senate, where they drafted a bipartisan bill that would have imposed the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever had. The fact that mega Republicans rejected the proposal out of hand and instead pursued a baseless and unconstitutional impeachment against you, Mr. Secretary, tells the American people all they need to know. The leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, bragged about killing this legislation because it would have helped President Biden. Republicans in both the House and Senate have said they will not pass this legislation to improve border security in an election year. Republicans are saying the quiet part out loud. They will not support the department and fix the border because it benefits them politically. Secretary Mayorkas, I appreciate your willingness to engage with this political circus and again, advocate for the needs of the department. The other thing I want to mention is that we didn't get to talk about AI. Cybersecurity is, as you know, within part of our mission. We share it with a couple of other committees, but it's the new frontier that we have to be front and center to defend all our systems. So I look forward to working with the department on our AI defenses going forward. The work that you and DHS employees do is critical, and I want to assure you that this committee is still valued by some members of this committee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and thank you again, Mr. Secretary.